The mountainous regions of our world are some of the most hostile places. Some have made it their life goal to conquer them. However, during this process, some of these individuals have encountered things they couldn't explain. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at these 3 mysterious events reported from Mount Everest. Yeti. The word Yeti translates as a magical creature and fittingly something beyond the realm of our knowledge. Researchers who have looked into the phenomena have said that these creatures roam around Mount Everest. These beings have been described as enormous and covered in hair, resembling giant apes. They are said to emit a loud yelping call, but on all occasions have steered away from any human contact. The reportings of the Yetis have become so frequent that the creatures have now an established place in Himalayan culture. Their name is mentioned in numerous businesses across India, Bhutan, Tibet, and Nepal. In the latter country, you can even book a room at the Yak and Yeti Hotel and fly Yeti Airlines. The first sightings of the Yeti date back to 326 BC, when stories about the creatures had become so commonplace that Alexander the Great himself set out to the Indus Valley to try and conquer one. His mission was unsuccessful, and it didn't look like there would be any concrete proof about the existence of these creatures, until 1921, when Lieutenant Colonel Charles Howard Berry led the 1921 British Mount Everest reconnaissance expedition. When the explorers were crossing the Lac Pelah, they encountered footprints they thought must have belonged to a large loping grey wolf, which, in the soft snow, formed double tracks rather like those of a barefooted man. The local guides on the expedition immediately attributed the tracks to the wild man of the snows. When Howard Berry reported back his findings, the tracks were quickly linked to the Yetis that supposedly inhabited Mount Everest. The legend of the Yetis only grew stronger in 1951 when Eric Shipton, a highly respected British explorer, found another footprint on the Menglung Glacier. He took a photograph of this footprint to serve as evidence to all. The photograph showed an enormous footprint of 13 inches with claw marks and a thumb where a toe should be. Further evidence came just 2 years later when Edmund Hillary, another British explorer, found unusual animal hairs on Mount Everest that he could not attribute to any known species. This fresh batch of evidence caused a surge in expeditions to Mount Everest in bids to catch a sighting of the Yeti. For example, American oilman Tom Slick mounted numerous expeditions, some lasting for 6 months and involving up to 500 porters, while Hollywood film star James Stewart went looking for the Yetis and reportedly found a Yeti finger during his expedition. It is important to note that DNA tests run in 2011 revealed that the finger was actually from a human. Some explorers have claimed to have seen the Yetis. For example, in 1939, the explorer Ernst Schaefer was reported as having shot and killed a Yeti, and Reinhold Messner claimed to have seen a Yeti around Tiber in 1986, when he was out for a walk. He described the creature as large and dark and moving like a man would, only a lot faster and stronger. Despite continuing to chase the creatures around the Himalayas for around the next 12 years, Messner had no other sightings of Yetis. Notably, there are skeptics who deny the existence of the Yetis. They argue that the creatures that Schaefer and Messner described were probably Tibetan bears known to roam the region. They argue our knowledge of Tibetan bears is sparse due to the rarity of sightings, meaning we are not knowledgeable in the creature's build and movements, and could easily fall into the trap of mistaking the bear for an unknown and magical creature like the Yeti. The Ghost of Mount Everest. For centuries, explorers of Mount Everest have reported strange and mysterious sightings they can only attribute to ghostly and supernatural beings. While many of these tales have been dismissed as hoaxes or the results of hallucinations caused by exhaustion and altitude changes, some ghostly elements have come up time and time again from different explorers, so are harder to dismiss. There is no doubt that Mount Everest is the perfect setting for all sorts of horror stories. The mountain is littered with the corpses of people who came from all over the world to attempt to climb the Himalayan mountain. These people fell victim to the avalanches, slippery slopes, and inhospitable temperatures. Some of these bodies have even become landmarks for other climbers. For example, the corpse of Sewang Paljo, easily recognizable for his green boots, has become a landmark on the main northeast ridge route of the mountain to guide explorers. However, others claim the dead bodies have led to numerous ghosts that roam the mountain. Many climbers have reported seeing ghosts while climbing Mount Everest. For example, in 2004, Pemba Dorje described how he was pestered by the ghosts of dead climbers who looked like black shadows and approached him and begged him for food. His tale was supported by the Nepal Mountaineering Association's president, Ang Sering, who attributed the ghosts to climbers who had not been properly buried. Another example of ghostly sightings occurred in 1975, when Dougal Haston and Doug Scott claimed to sense a third climber helping them on a particularly brutal night while climbing Mount Everest. The ghost shared the men's snow hole and encouraged them during the final hours of their climb. Haston and Scott claim that the ghost was pioneer Andrew Sandy Irvine, who perished while attempting to climb the mountain in 1924. On a similar vein, in 1933, as Frank Smythe was descending down a particularly dangerous area of Mount Everest, he came across the ghost of a man. Smythe reports that he soon realized the ghost had surrounded him with two objects: squat, undeveloped wings, and a beak-like protuberance like the spout of a tea kettle. He argues these objects helped him in his descent down the mountain. Some of the ghosts have been reported as appearing in the surrounding area of Mount Everest. For example, a local villager in Bemni named Mohan Singh described how a strange man appeared outside his home and reached for Singh's shirt, but his fingers went straight through Singh's body as a ghost's fingers would. Singh described how during the encounter the man's body continuously changed sizes, growing up to 9 feet tall, then suddenly shrinking to the height of a chicken. Another example is the ghost of Indian soldier Baba Harbhajan Singh, who is said to appear on horseback and still protects India's border against any impending attacks. Maurice Wilson climbed Everest alone. 2 decades before Mount Everest was successfully climbed by a British expedition, 34-year-old Englishman Maurice Wilson attempted the mountain alone. Maurice Wilson's attempt to climb the mountain in 1933 was unsuccessful, but has become infamous in mountaineering history, mainly because of his lack of experience and impaired physicality. Wilson was injured by machine gun fire during World War I, and his left arm was largely immobile and frequently caused him pain. Following the war, he travelled around the globe and suffered from a monstrous bout of tuberculosis. Wilson managed to survive and attributed his survival to being cured by prayer, fasting, and mystical intervention from a group of Indian sages on his return journey to England. Despite his weakened physical state, Wilson's belief he had received divine help propelled him to want to climb Mount Everest. With no preparation, Wilson began planning how he would fly a small plane to Tibet, crash-land it on the upper slopes of Mount Everest, and then climb to the top of the mountain. He purchased a second-hand 1925 Gypsy Moth plane and gained his pilot's license at the London Aeroplane Club. Notably, Wilson had suffered a crash during lessons and had been described as ham-fisted at the controls by his instructors. The British Indian government and the Air Ministry, hearing of Wilson's plans to fly to Tibet, refused to offer any support or necessary flying permits. Despite this, Wilson began his journey through the skies. Landing in Bahrain, Wilson was informed that British officials had directly intervened to prevent his journey and declared the airspace ahead to Tibet as closed to civilian air traffic. Wilson was told if he did not fly back immediately, he would be arrested. Pretending to fly back, Wilson actually changed course in the air and headed to India. During the journey, his plane engine faltered to a complete stall. However, Wilson impressively managed to safely land in Gwadar and then fly onward to the Nepali border. When arriving at the border, Wilson's plane was impounded by a local British constable. However, this did not faze him. He began travelling by road to Darjeeling, where he disguised himself as a Buddhist monk and walked into Tibet alongside 3 newly befriended Sherpa companions. By mid-April, Wilson and his companions had reached the Rumbuk Monastery, just below the traditional Everest base camp. The men's first attempt up Mount Everest lasted for 9 days, and accounts suggest completely knocked Wilson out. He rested for 18 days and then set off again. By the third day, the men had managed to reach Camp 3 below the North Col. With a little preparation of the route, Wilson's diary showed he had assumed he would be able to follow the footprints left over by previous explorers. He began the journey from Camp 3 alone, despite his companions begging him to change his mind. He had hoped to reach the summit of the mountain by his 36th birthday on April 21st, but his body was found some 2,300 meters below Mount Everest's peak the following year by Eric Shipton and Dr. Charles Warren. Shipton described how discovering Wilson's body had deeply moved him and how he respected Wilson's belief that all difficulties could be overcome by willpower. But what do you make of these 3 events reported from Mount Everest? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below and help us by growing this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.